Okay, so I think many people have had a chance to log in. So I want to welcome everybody from the 3 neighborhoods in the Rugby Hills area who are co-hosting this event. My name is Len Shaba. I teach in the politics department at UVA, and I'm with the Kellytown Neighborhood Association. We are also co-hosting this event with the Oxford Hills Neighborhood Association, as well as Meadowbrook Hills. So we hope that we have a good mix of people from all 3 neighborhoods, and we look forward to engaging our 5 candidates who have generously shared their time with us this evening and are going to answer a series of questions. So just to share with the audience the plan for today, the 3 neighborhood associations had discussed questions ahead of time, and we prepared 3 questions that we're going to ask to all 5 members of the all 5 candidates for city council. And so you'll have a chance to hear from all of them on 3 different issues. That's going to take us about 30 minutes. And then we'll switch to a Q&A format where you'll be able to submit your questions via chat. And if you want to, as the questioning is going on, if you have a question, you can go ahead and submit. You will also be able to hold up your yellow hand using the raise hand feature once we open things up for a Q&A. So that's the format for today. We are recording this. We are planning to share it with members of the neighborhoods who were not able to attend tonight, and also with the candidates. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to start by introducing our 5 candidates. First, Dashad Cooper was born in Charlottesville and grew up in the area, moving frequently because of his family's financial difficulties. In his bio that he prepared for his campaign website, he credits local teachers with helping him overcome some of the things that could have jeopardized his future in his middle school years. He worked for the city in Parks and Rec before moving to his current position in social services. Dashad? All right. Our second candidate is Natalie Oschrin. She is a 2007 CHS graduate who became involved in politics first as a high school student with the Young Liberals. She also was involved with the Sorensen Institute. She graduated from UVA a few years later and then spent the early part of her career in Charleston, South Carolina, before returning to Charlottesville in 2016. She now lives in Mead Park neighborhood and works in the wedding hospitality side of a local winery business. Natalie?
Hi, everyone.
Our third candidate is Michael Payne. He also grew up in the Charlottesville area, attending Albemarle High School, and attended a different Virginia college, William and Mary, before returning to Charlottesville to work as a community organizer, co-founding Indivisible Charlottesville, and also working with other affordable housing groups such as Pachem. He is a current member of the City Council in his first term, and he's worked on issues including affordable housing, local climate action, and public transportation. Michael?
Hello, good to see everyone.
Our fourth candidate is Lloyd Snook, who also grew up in Charlottesville, attending Lane High School and graduating in 1970, which gives away his generation, and returned after earning his law degree at the University of Michigan to practice law here. He founded his own law firm in 1985 and has been representing and advising local clients ever since, including taking 2 death row appeals all the way to the Supreme Court. He raised his family here and has been active in local church and public service activities since the 1980s. He too is in his first term on council. Lloyd? And our fifth and final candidate is Bob Fenwick. He was a combat engineer commander during the Charlottesville in 1976. He worked here as a contractor for many years and raised 2 boys through the Charlottesville Public Schools. City for 1 term in 2013 to 2017. and remarked that during that time, quote, I learned much about maneuvering through a government bureaucracy and why they say politics is a blood sport. I expected some give and take, but was disappointed to learn this meant give to the developers and take from the citizens. Thank you, Bob. All right, so without further ado, we want to hear from all the candidates. I'm going to provide them with our first question in the area of traffic transit. There are several streets like Rose Hill, Rugby Avenue, Rugby Road, and Barracks Preston that drivers passing through our neighborhood use as thoroughfares with disregard for the speed limits and for those who are actually living in these neighborhoods. Way more traffic is passing through our intersections than our street infrastructure was designed for. What specific steps would you support to slow down traffic, including specifically in our neighborhoods, and improve pedestrian and bike safety on streets like these? And so our first candidate responding to that question will be Dashad Cooper.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So know the area pretty well. One of the things that we definitely need to take a look at is the speed limit. Excuse me. Look at the speed limit and see how much it is. Possibly do a survey on that, but it's pretty common sense. We don't need to do a survey. Might need to lower the speed even more because nobody should be speeding through a pedestrian area. Definitely expand on more bike lanes. And then, working on our transportation will decrease much of the traffic flow that's coming in and out of those areas. So definitely invest heavily in our transportation. I've been looking out the state at different areas that are implementing electric buses. Atlas, Georgia, for instance, they're doing electric buses. So I'm really taking a look at that and see how they're implementing that. And but yeah, implementing that and expanding on more bike lanes, because right now it's too much traffic going on in Charlottesville. We definitely need to fix our sidewalks and increase more sidewalks that are not walkable for people. So that's my spill. You're on mute.
I think I might just leave myself on. Thank you, Dashad. And we're going to turn next to Natalie Oschrin.
Hi, thanks for the question. Transit and transportation and coming up with better options for folks is a big part of my platform. So I'm glad to be able to talk about it. The first thing is that folks that are using that space are using it the way it is designed. So it is a policy choice to have the road designed the way it is. And we need to first think of different ways we can design it. There's something called a road diet, where you shrink the amount of space that's available for cars and give it to things that will both help slow cars down and also make it more accessible for pedestrians and safer for bikers. Anytime you can get someone out of a car and into a bike lane or being able to use a sidewalk is going to make your road safer and quieter. Cars are noisy, and the best way to make them quieter is to have fewer of them, excuse me. So there's lowering the speed limit, as Dashad mentioned, is great. It'll cause people to go slower, hopefully, but you have to enforce it as well. But if the road is designed like driving 250 has a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, that road is not designed for 35 miles an hour. So building infrastructure that will cause people to naturally slow down, bump outs, street trees, speed humps, all that sort of thing are very low cost, high effect ways that will slow traffic down. And then give people the alternative to driving cars, that is bike lanes, sidewalks that are connected, buses, of course. But we also have to consider where that traffic is coming from and where is it going. Some people are certainly crossing town, but a lot of the traffic that's in the city comes from the surrounding counties, folks that are commuting in to work and then commuting home and not staying in town or living in town. So we need to make it easier for everyone to live closer to where they are so that walking and biking is more feasible for more people.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you.
So next we're going to turn to Lloyd Snook.
Well, the first thing I have to just caution everybody is that I think all of the streets that you mentioned are already 25 miles an hour. We cannot, by state law, make those less than 25 miles an hour. I do not believe there is any authority for us to lower the speed limits, except in school zones for school purposes and things like that. So that's not really an option. Where I think we can do something is, and there are a couple of people have mentioned this, we can talk about bike lanes, we can talk about making the city more pedestrian friendly, we can talk about a meaningful transit system. Charlottesville does not have a reliable transit system. There are plans afoot now to study how we can do that, and more importantly, how we can pay for it, where we would get the money. The main requirement would have to be that we would have to at least double the number of buses. Buses are extremely expensive, and that's something we rely on state and federal funds for like 97% of the cost of a bus. So we have to go by the way that the state and feds and federal government are sort of setting out the ground rules of how we buy buses and what that looks like. One of the things we're going to be talking about this fall is whether we should be saying whenever we buy a new bus, it's going to be an electric vehicle. There's a study underway right now. That study should be to us by probably in draft form by about September or October, and then we'll look at it from there. But I'm hoping that it will show, I believe it will show that buses that are electric buses are definitely options, and that we would be able to then get the state and the federal funds to underwrite those. If we can do that, that I think will enable us to, it'll enable us to do one thing in particular that I would really like to see us try to have a system of park and ride lots with buses that would bring people from, let's say they park at Barracks Road, they can bring them up Barracks Road in a bus to downtown. There are two main destinations. Charlottesville has an advantage. We have two main destinations, the density of where people are headed to for work, downtown or the university. We ought to be able to make a park and ride system work. That's one of the things that's getting studied, and I hope we'll have an answer on that within the next 6 months.
Thank you, Lloyd. Just a point of information, I think you are correct, I think, about the speed limits on most of those streets, but on Rose Hill, there is a 35 mile per hour speed limit. And that is one area some of us are concerned about. Michael Payne?
Sure. Yeah. As others have already talked about, I think it's important to do whatever you can, and particularly in residential areas, to try to privilege pedestrian and bicyclists over vehicles, particularly in a residential area. And this is a problem throughout the city. And in each of the cases, I kind of look at there's short-term, medium-term, and long-term things to implement on the city end. The short term, there is research that shows that things like paintings at intersections, something that visually points it out, along with plantings and visual things, does have some traffic calming measure. It's not the number one solution. It is a relatively small effect, but it is a real one, and something that's a quick build out that can be done on a shorter timeline. Medium term, as others have already mentioned, particularly in the one thoroughfare that is 35 miles an hour now, you can work with the traffic engineer to bring down the speed limit. We've done that on Cherry recently. We've looked at it on 5th Street. And you can also install traffic cameras, and where it is allowed in, under the definition of a school zone, have that traffic camera enforcement as well, which is effective. Where there are areas near school guards, crossing guards have also been extremely effective at calming down traffic and reducing speeds. In the longer term, which will have the biggest impact but is slower, as others have mentioned, building out a regional transit system that has more reliable routes and frequencies. I think our regional transit partnership is making real progress to there, but it will still be a number of years away and will require authorization from the General Assembly to have a new tax authority in order to fund it. But I do think on a 10, 15-year time horizon, we are going to be able to get there. And I think that will make a difference, not just for people who live in Charlottesville and are commuting within the city, but some of those people who are living outside of Charlottesville and using it as a cut through to get through something in Charlottesville to work, et cetera. And then finally, longer term is the smart scale process and looking at those major areas as that's the opportunity where you can change the flow of traffic, as well as install much more robust bike ped infrastructure to make the flow of transportation really different there, which I think those are all areas where longer term, I think that's possible. But again, just being clear, that's not something that's going to happen in 5 years. That's more a 10, 15-year time horizon.
Thank you, Michael. And our final candidate on this question is Bob Fenwick.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. If I'm successful, the first thing I would do would be to let the other members of council know what I believe is important in a city transportation policy, and then talk with the city manager and the Charlottesville Transit Chief to ensure any proposals I brought forward would improve the overall approach. But in general, my approach has always been do the simple, common sense things first. Don't drop a big, new, expensive program on citizens when you don't have the ridership to support it. Make sure your foundation is sturdy and secure. There are almost always tweaks you can do to any program that would improve the service and save money. I've spoken to many citizens over the years, and several items come immediately to mind about moving around the city. First, you have to acknowledge that this city is 10.2 square miles. We don't have the space for new roads, and the roads we have are shared by people and businesses. So that's a limitation we have to remember and work around. So smaller buses and bus shelters. I've been a big advocate of both things for many years. Many people have noticed that no matter what time of day it is, there are mostly empty buses, even during rush hour. Smaller buses mean fewer accidents because you don't have to wrangle a long bus around corners and in and out of traffic. Smaller, shorter buses also mean driving the narrow roads in town would limit the number of scrapes to be repaired on the buses and the lower the city insurance should be. And smaller means less fuel and cheaper maintenance. On bus shelters, nobody will increase their use of buses when they have to wait in the rain, snow, or frigid wind. When the ridership increases and more routes and run the buses more often, add more routes and run the buses more often, and make the service more dependable. And of course, continue programs to encourage biking and walking. And I really appreciate the signs that are all over town about being careful and slowing down because children are walking to school. I think that's going to make a big difference. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for sharing your ideas. It's great to hear all of you sharing these concerns and having great ideas for improving the city in this area. I'm now going to ask our second question, and this time we're going to start with Natalie Oschrin once I ask it. So this question is, how do you plan to address the rising cases of gun violence and other crimes happening across Charlottesville neighborhoods? Natalie?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The rise of gun violence especially in the last 6 months is scary and not good, and it definitely needs to be addressed. The limitation that city council has is just being a city body. We can't affect state laws and institute broad sweeping legislation that would do, I encourage our state legislators to do that, and I look forward to seeing what moves they have in preventing that. But what we can do at a city level is allocate funding towards programs that will stop the gun violence from getting started in the first place. Addressing housing insecurity is a great way to give people what they need so that they have the resources to maintain job security, food security, mental health, and health in general. All of those stem at baseline from housing insecurity. If you're moving around a lot or spending too much money on where you're living, then you're not allowed to spend your mental and physical resources on creating a happy environment or doing things and activities that you enjoy or your family and kids enjoy that keep them off the streets, or getting into a culture where guns are fun and acceptable when they're really not. The other thing we can fund is other programs that kids, and not kids, because it's not just a kid problem, but folks can do after school, for starters, making sure that there's safe places for people to be during the day and at night, so people aren't afraid to be pedestrians, be bicyclists, because their neighborhoods and streets are safe from not just gun violence, but from car violence. So making sure that there's safe places for folks to live, so they don't just feel safe, but they actually are safe and have the resources to spend their energy in safe activities. And then giving alternatives and alternative activities, making sure our city pools have lifeguards by paying lifeguards enough, making sure that there's after school programs for kids. Those are all important ways of alternative time and money allocation for reducing violence and increasing community safety.
Thank you. We're turning next to Bob Fenwick.
Hi, I'm muted. Well, I'm gonna go through a couple. I'm just gonna go through like a line item of things here. First, make sure the police are adequately funded and trained, and the judicial system is capable of meting out justice quickly and fairly. Don't make any situation worse because you're not trained properly. Walk the city and the neighborhood so people see who you are, that you're interested in where they live. You'll learn a lot that way. Now, I was in several gangs when I was in middle school and high school. We flashed fake IDs and brought beer and tried to impress girls. We didn't judge each other, and we fought other boys who were just as dopey as we were. But we fought with our fists, and after a few swings, we would shake hands and move on. This was called growing up back then. It's much different now, and the solution will be more layered. But the bottom line is pay attention to what is going on around us. The young people are our future. They are worth the investment. I would encourage citizen organizations like BUCK, B-U-C-K, Brothers United to Cease the Killing. Take an interest in what they say and do. The solution to this problem will come from the people of the city, not from a program fashioned in City Hall and then imposed on the community. Encourage education in the trades. Not all students feel the need to go to college. Those of us who have had a service call know exactly what I mean. Many young men have no interest in learning how to code. If they do, fine, but encourage them if they want to go into a trade, that's open as well. Visit K-Tech. It's out in the county. Visit it. It lets the administrators and teachers know you are interested in their place in the education of the young people in our community. And adequately fund youth programs, family programs, and be sure to fully fund them as the new residential construction programs come online. During budget considerations, people programs should be at the top of the list, not the bottom. Caring for our citizens should not be an afterthought. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to turn next to Michael Payne.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you for the question. It's a very serious issue. Obviously, a few months ago, I attended the memorial for Mr. Eldridge Smith, who had passed away. And you see, it's not just a news story or a number. This is each person lost to gun violence. This is kids. This is a family. This is a neighborhood who for generations is going to be feeling the power of this loss. And the big picture is, I think we have to view it as unacceptable that anybody lives in a neighborhood where as a kid, they don't even feel safe to walk home from school or to go outside and play. And what do we do about that? There's no one answer. There's no easy thing we can do. But I think there's at least some research in terms of local action, in terms of what could make a difference. There is robust research that smaller things like lighting, investment in local neighborhood infrastructure does have a meaningful impact in reducing gun violence. Likewise, there's solid research that investment in youth programs in neighborhoods makes a real impact, as well as investment in one-on-one mentoring for at-risk youth from people in the local community who have an authentic connection with them. There's very robust research that makes an enormous impact. And I think it's critical that we invest in those programs. We've done a little bit of that. Our last budget cycle, we did invest in the Buck Squad, as well as we allocated $200,000 for gun violence prevention programs. That hasn't been decided yet how it will all be spent. But I expect that some of it will go to youth programs. The Uhuru Foundation with Mr. Robert Gray has been doing great work in our community that we should support. I do think it's something that has to come from the community up, and we invest in what's already going on. And then the final component of it is policing. We do have a police department that is down 30 officers from what its previous full staffing had been. And there is research that community policing has a impact on reducing gun violence, but it has to be community policing. The model of policing in the 80s and 90s, where you had police coming in and being perceived as an occupying force, hassling people over smaller, relatively inconsequential things, does not reduce gun violence, and it erodes the relationship between the community and the police even further and makes it harder to solve the problem. So that's some of the things we can do locally, but it's very big, and it deals with a lot of structural issues of people having no hope in the economy or feeling that they don't have a place in our local community. That's the bigger picture thing that has to change. I'm not out of time, so thank you.
Thank you. No, we know this is a really difficult problem that we asked you to respond to in 2.5 minutes. So we appreciate all of your answers. Dashad.
It's really not one answer of it. I actually live in a high impact area. Like Michael was saying, majority of the people that either got shot did the shooting. I know some of them I watched the Boys and Girls Club. Some of them I grew up with, and then some of them were a little bit older and younger than me. Just as everybody said, we have to invest into our community. And that starts with being in the community more, talking to the community more, listening to the community. We have a great chief. He's definitely on the ground doing the work, and I appreciate him every day. He has to stay consistent with it. Because, past chiefs have did it before over and over again. But you definitely have to gain the citizens' confidence. Because at the end of the day, it's a multitude of things. It's, resources for, education after school. Of course, you tie in mental health, from COVID that has upticked a lot of people's mental health, affordable housing, and of course, transit, all of them, combined together with this. So at the end of the day, we have to, put our kids first. Of course, majority of the shooting that had happened from, my point of view, from me being on the ground and listening to everybody, majority of them are kids that are doing shootings, which is beyond crazy because, back in the day when, growing up, it kind of sort of used to be like that with me, but not as frequent as it is now. Just as Bob said, I grew up, in a gang too as well. And, my teachers, pulled me out and, kept, telling me, you're a leader. And so we need to, find other resources like, our local partners and band together, of course, bringing in our local community too as well, our residents, and, the school system. And we have to band together, put our resources together to come up with a plan to, end this gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you. So last on this question, Lloyd Snook.
So what I would say is a lot of it has already been said, and I'm not going to repeat all of that. I'll just note that there are basically 3 different kinds of problems that we've got that lead to shootings. The first problem is adults basically involved in drug distribution activities. The second is juveniles doing it to settle whatever little scores they may have on their own. The third is domestic violence. Domestic violence is something that, there are a number of programs through the courts that are actually making some real progress on some domestic violence issues. And frankly, those numbers have been down over the last, say, 8 or 10 years. In fact, most of the actual reports of and crimes of shooting have been declining for 20 years. It's just been in the last couple of years we've seen a tick up, and the tick up in many cases has been because of the influx of guns and the ability of juveniles to get hold of guns and to make that a way that they decide they want to settle their scores. I don't know whether it's good news or bad news that they tend to be lousy shots. The good news is they don't often hit anybody. The bad news is that they're more likely to hit somebody who is completely innocent and unrelated. So it's definitely not something that we can just sort of wish away. We've got specific proposals that the city is already funding to address all of these problems, to look in particular at the juvenile issues. You know, the Buck Squad is dealing with adults. Uhuru is dealing more with juveniles. City of Promise is a program dealing with juveniles. There's a proposal for some more youth sports activities. Ultimately, to steal a line from Marion Wright Edelman, the best prevention for this kind of violence is a future that the person can believe in. And if these kids don't believe that they've got a future, then violence and shooting and guns and so on seems like a more attractive option. So we really need to focus our efforts on giving the kids a future that they can believe in through programs, through schools, through programs that the community runs, whatever it may be. That's got to be our key.
Thank you. And so now we get to our third and final prepared question that we're going to ask all of the candidates. This one is on zoning. The new zoning ordinance has been a much discussed topic in our neighborhood. And we have a proposal on the table from the consultants for modules 1 and 2 that give us some many of the parameters that the city council is going to be asked to vote on or modify. Now, we know that this could all get settled before the new council takes office, but we'd still like to know which of what you've heard so far, specific features of this ordinance do you particularly like, and which features do you think need to be changed or modified in some way? Thanks. And our first one is on this one is Michael Payne. Thanks.
Sure. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. That should be more than enough. But I'll step back at first. The impetus for all of this, one of the statistics that I think highlights the housing problem we have, median household income in Charlottesville for Black families, it's $39,000. For white families, that number is $86,000. That's one statistic. And you see that impact the percentage of renters who are cost burdened, the percentage of low-income households who can afford to live in the city, the amount of money that is going to either rent or mortgage costs each year, and how that filters down into creating challenges for childcare, for providing resources for their children. That's the impetus for it. And how do we get at that through zoning, which is one tool for housing? It's a specific, all things considered, relatively limited tool, but it's a very important one. So what is done that I think is good in the draft zoning rewrite, which is important to emphasize, it's still draft. We haven't seen module 3. This is something that has not gone directly to council for discussion or debate yet. But I think the inclusionary zoning element is a positive thing in terms of mandating that new construction of 10 or more units have affordable units at 60% AMI or below, because it's critical to explicitly provide housing at that level. And inclusionary zoning or direct investment and subsidy or land acquisition through land banks and land trusts is really the primary way you're going to get there. In terms of allowing more housing types to be legalized throughout the city, I do think that is generally a positive thing, that in residential areas you are legalizing the ability to build duplexes, triplexes, and provide more affordable housing options for people who are both looking for homeownership to have more options. The sensitive area is an area that I still think needs substantial more work, because one of the risks is impacts of things vary a lot depending on context and parcel. I think there is a lot to dive into in terms of the risk for areas that have a high percentage of low-income renters that aren't protected by any kind of formal subsidy, of a risk of gentrification and displacement in those specific areas. I also think, understandably, the main focus of conversation within the Planning Commission so far has been residential areas. I think we need to spend a lot more time really looking at our mixed-use commercial corridors. I think there are a lot of unanswered questions that we haven't yet dove into in terms of what we're looking for there, what you're likely to get in terms of Class A office space versus actual housing or local businesses, who has access to capital to invest in new businesses in those areas, et cetera. So we could go on for a long time, but I guess that's at least some of it.
Thank you, Michael. And I do think there might be some other questions that follow up, and you'll have other chances to add details. Dashad?
Take a little page out of Mayor Snook's book. I believe, and I'm 100% sure, maybe 95%, that this will be voted on already by the current council. So with this new zoning, I love a lot of things about it. But if we're still not incorporating our transportation, which could take a while, into the picture, then we're going to be creating another problem. I know that's something that is working on, but without our transportation incorporated into this rezoning, it's we're going to have the same problem still. We'll have an uptick of more affordable housing, but we're still going to have more cars, more congestion, more traffic. So what Lloyd also said previously, having a parking lot, definitely having one too on the outskirts of the city, for a lot of our employees work in the surrounding counties, Albemarle, Nelson, Buckingham, and so on and so on. And having this parking lot where they can come closer to the city, not inside the city, and then having a regular transportation that runs every 15 to 25 minutes to get them to work will also lessen the burden on the rezoning too as well. Because like I said, it's all gonna backfire in my point of view if the transit station is not up and operational. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Fenwick.
All right, about the zoning rewrite. Here's what we want from zoning. First and foremost, citizens expect a substantial say in how their city grows. We are not obstructionists. We, both homeowners and renters, are the bill payers. We are told that we need to broaden our tax base. Broadening our tax base doesn't mean any tax relief for us. It means our taxes go up. We have increased the tax base consistently over the past 10 to 15 years, and taxes have never come down. Second, during the design development stages, citizens expect honesty, transparency, and respect with appropriate penalties for non-compliance from start to finish. I'll give you two examples of what we don't want. We don't want the vice chairman of the Planning Commission calling for a boycott of a small local business, excuse me, simply because the business owner criticized the proposed plan. That was shameful, and yet the city and county were both mute. We don't want to hear what a favor the university or other special interest is doing for the citizens in providing jobs and substantial increases in tax revenue, because we're the ones paying the taxes, unless they also acknowledge how fortunate they are to have a local workforce as talented, hardworking, and generous as we are. It's a quid pro quo thing. Here's what we will get. Chaotic parking in your neighborhoods, more traffic, more disruption, and rezonings that are out of character in our neighborhoods, more displacement. Higher taxes, because more of the city's resources are being locked up in density, and the few crumbs that are left are being frittered away in consultants, expediters, and facilitators, when the talent we have next door is more than enough to chart a clear path forward. So the document is several hundred pages long. It's incomprehensible and gives rise to talk of affordable housing and housing affordability. How do those words make the discussion any clearer? So why do we have it? It's the wrong cure for a flawed diagnosis. If somebody's looking to lay the responsibility for the lack of affordable housing at the feet of somebody or something, they need look no further than the city council. The buck stops at the city council, not in the pages of the existing zoning code, whose provisions have been waived time and again by city council in recent history. Thank you.
Thank you. Lloyd Snook.
The zoning ordinance rewrite has gotten really confused and muddled for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that I think we've allowed the discussion to be that somehow this was going to be how we were going to cure the problem of affordable housing. It is not. The RA, RB, RC discussion that we've been having of different ways that you can increase density in the residential neighborhoods right now. The only way that you can get any affordable housing out of that, and by affordable housing, I mean specifically housing for people at base 50-60% AMI and lower. The only way you can do that is through massive city subsidies that frankly aren't going to happen. So we're investing a lot of political energy in fussing about this double density units bonus. It's just not going to happen. The reality is that when we were first talked to about all of this with the future land use map a year ago, well, 2 years ago almost now, the discussion was always that we were going to have more density, but it would be houses that looked like houses, looked like apartment buildings. They would be house sized, house shaped, and so on. And that's the way it was sold to us. And frankly, that's the way I sold it to a number of you all when I talked to you all about this plan and said, hey, it's not going to be bad. This is what they're talking about. The only way to do that, it seems to me, and is something that we have not allowed to be done thus far. But again, as Michael said, it hasn't come to council yet, and we haven't had our shot at it. I think one way to do it would be to have a limit on the size of the building in, for example, an RA lot. An RA lot right now, typical RA house or R1 house could be 3,000, 3,500 square feet, up to about 4,000 square feet in some places. That basically whatever you want to do within 3,500 square feet, I don't care whether it's one use, two use, or three uses, that would be permissible. The point is that it's still going to look and feel like a neighborhood. The same kind of thing we can do to limit the way in which density can just be crammed into a neighborhood. I think it can, if we don't do it right, it can really destroy the character of the neighborhood, the feel of the neighborhood, and it would violate what folks had told us 2 years ago we were going to be getting.
Thank you, Lloyd. And our last response on this comes from Natalie Oschrin.
Hi. So I'm excited about the potential for new housing in Charlottesville because while the zoning rewrite is not single-handedly going to help affordable housing and make everything better, there's no way to make everything better without increasing the amount of homes available. We can throw subsidies at programs and people all day long, but if there aren't enough homes, people will be left out. It's math. So we need to build more homes so there's more opportunities and more choices for individuals, young families, multi-generational families, workers, single parents, roommates, and the aging population being able to downsize and stay in your same neighborhood because that is now available. That's all important. The current single family exclusionary zoning means that a house that is going to be built has to be built at the most expensive per unit cost. So changing that will allow people to build housing that is more affordable at a baseline. I am speaking to you live from a duplex right now. I believe in this, I live it. Missing middle housing is a great opportunity to do smart infill that can let people live close to where they want to work and play. And it will also, in getting people closer to where they are, as I mentioned before, will give them the opportunity to not have to drive. A lot of folks are concerned when they imagine more housing in their neighborhoods that it will lead to more traffic. Not necessarily. Again, that's a policy decision. If people are able to be close to where they need to get and they have a safe and pleasant way of getting there, and Module 2 does address streetscapes and how they can be made comfortable, and we can invest in that, then people might not choose to get into a car, which is great for sound and the environment. There's tax relief options for folks who are concerned about affordability for their property values, which have gone up a lot. One of the things, I know I'm running out of time, but so I'm excited in general about the effects of this. I know it's not perfect, and in one of those places where it's not perfect is how it addresses those sensitive areas. But let's keep in mind that when you build more housing somewhere, it's going to take the pressure off of somewhere else, including those sensitive areas. So the traditionally exclusionary neighborhoods need to open their doors to allow that to help the general community overall.
Thank you very much to all of our candidates for taking on such challenging issues in short answers format. We're now going to give our audience a chance to ask their questions. As we announced at the beginning, you can either pose your questions in chat, or you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon. Ben Heller will call on people or draw questions out of the chat. We are asking you to address your questions to just one or two people, because if we have too many questions that all 5 people respond to, we won't have enough time to get to very many questions. Okay, so let's open it up and see what you want to ask about.
I see first question from John Baltz. John, I'm going to allow you to talk. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay. This question is for Ms. Oschrin. Oh, your name is hard to pronounce as mine. You've been talking a lot about bicycling, and that pleases me immensely. I commuted to work since 1957, always by bicycle. But good things conflict with one another. The idea of building a bike lane down Barracks Road will require cutting down 61 mature trees. And I love trees. This to me is a shame. I've been on the Arboretum Committee for over 10 years at the university. 61, I've seen the plans and counted the number of X's on trees that are going down. And I think it's for a bike lane that really doesn't work very well. There are much better places to put our money if we want to build biking. So I guess my question to you is tree canopy, global warming important? Yes. Is biking important? Yes. Where do you come down on it? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I was at the city council meeting when you spoke, so I do remember you. And just for everyone, it's Oschrin, like Oshkosh.
Thank you, thank you.
So I think that bikes and environmentalism do not need to fight necessarily with trees and environmentalism. There are, of course, the tree canopy is great. I love trees too. In places where there's a solid tree canopy, studies show that general temperatures are down in neighborhoods without tree canopies. It's hotter during the summer. That leads to increased housing, heating and cooling costs. There's inequities there that we need to be cognizant of. A great way to facilitate reduction in global warming is to get people out of cars. There, aside from the argument for individual responsibility versus corporations in addressing climate change is too big for the minute I have left. So citing personal responsibility is not going to make everything better, but we have to do it where we can. And that includes encouraging folks to bike wherever they possibly can. Thank you so much for biking so long and being a dedicated cyclist. That's great. One of the amazing things that we have nowadays are e-bikes, which allow people to bike past an age where a mechanical bike becomes too difficult. It lets people be in cargo bikes, get their kids to school, and the options for expanding e-bike usage is really promising for getting cars off the road. Road diets where you encroach on the car lane instead of on the property or the tree side are another great way to make driving both less attractive, but also the alternates more attractive and more pleasant. So that's something we can also consider. Trees are good. But also one more thing is if the city manages street trees and has them on the outside of sidewalks, then they offer both shade to bicyclists and walkers and protection against the cars to pedestrians. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
There's a question that came in on the Q&A from Lucy Pola, and I'll just read it. It's for Mayor Snook. As a follow-up to Mayor Snook's suggestion about park and rides, I'm wondering if we've explored a partnership with the university to assist with funding some of these transportation needs.
The simple answer is that that's one of those things that we're working on with the university through the Regional Transit Partnership. The Regional Transit Partnership's got a study underway to try to figure out what would be necessary for us to actually establish a regional transit authority. We're given the authority to have a regional transit authority, but we're not given any way to fund the regional transit authority. That's going to have to go back through the state. In other places that have had it, that's sometimes been an extra penny on the gas tax or various other ways it might get funded. Once that happens, I mean, the part of what this study is trying to do is to figure out what it would look like to have a real, reliable regional transit system. And part of that effort is to talk with the university. The university's got its own transit system. There have been efforts over the last few years, over the last couple of decades, actually, to try to integrate in some way CAT and UTS. There have been all kinds of reasons why that has not happened. I'm not going to try to relitigate those, but it's one of those things where everybody agrees, gee, this sounds like a great idea in practice, in theory. I wonder how we could make it work in practice. Part of this study that's going to be, I'm thinking it's probably going to come out next year, is going to be an exploration of how we can have this regional transit authority, including the university, including funding with the university, and have an integrated system. So yes, we're exploring it. It's still at least a year away from a plan and probably 5 years away from implementation.
Thanks. I'm just going to read the next question that came in on the Q&A, and this says from anonymous attendee for Michael Payne. Why has your organization, Indivisible Charlottesville, sent out mass mailings labeling everyone who objects to any part of the new rezoning process as, quote, racist NIMBYs?
Okay. So I will admit I haven't read every single email Indivisible Charlottesville has ever sent, but to my knowledge, they have never sent any communication that uses that language. I haven't been on the steering committee since I've elected, so I haven't read every single email, but to my knowledge, nothing has been said using that specific language or saying that anybody who has any objection is for that reason. I mean, I think in general, this whole debate has become so emotional. There's a lot of fear, and it's understandably, because on both sides, people who want affordable housing, people who live in their neighborhoods, have vested in their home ownership, care deeply about it. And I think we have to have, as best we can, a debate that is focused on facts, focusing on trying to get good public policy right. I can only speak for myself and what I have said. I have never said anything like that in any personally or in campaign emails. And I myself, you could have attended the joint work sessions. I have a lot of questions about the current draft proposal. I think there's a lot to look at in sensitive areas. So I certainly don't consider myself a racist NIMBY for having questions about something about the specific draft in front of us. So I guess that's the best answer I can give. And again, I don't currently sit on their steering committee. If there's an email I've missed where that exact language is used and you send it to me, I'm happy to look at it. But like sincerely, genuinely, to my knowledge, I've never seen that language used and have not used it myself.
Okay, thanks. There's another question on the chat from Al Paula, and this is for Ms. Oschrin, and Mr. Cooper. And a longish question that should have a fairly short answer because I think it's just a number. Some candidates have supported upzoning as a way to help with housing affordability. The average sale price of a Seaville home in the last 12 months has hovered just under $300 a square foot. The typical home is not that big, as I understand it, with the average being around 1,500 square feet. If zoning is boosting housing prices, can you tell us by how much the current zoning is doing that? And as a follow-up, how much lower would prices be if we had been living under the draft zoning plan? And why does Ms. Oschrin, you go first?
Sure. I can't give the exact math on that, but I can give some examples. The house that my parents bought when we first moved here in 1990, they bought for about $80,000 or $85,000. Going with inflation, that would be about $212,000 today. An easy market rate could get 450 or more. This is a relatively small, I have a place in my heart for it, but unimpressive house downtown. The gap there is because exclusionary zoning has kept American cities underdeveloped for decades. So the homes we build now are part of the catching up that we need to do to make the city more equitable, livable, and affordable. I don't know to specifically get to the dollar per square foot that you might be asking for in your question, but I know that we have to make up a big difference in what we have not been building for the last several decades.
Thanks, and I think the question was also directed to Mr. Cooper, if you care to chime in.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I've been trying to get my mother to buy a house for like forever. But of course, with the inflation going on, she's totally against it right now. Like Nat said, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I do know that, and this is just my opinion, under this new draft that's coming in, it should potentially look cheaper. Like Lloyd said, it won't happen over time. It's not going to be a quick impact. It's going to be something that we all have to ease into and kind of wait for things to fluctuate and, meet the middle. But whoever answered that question, I would definitely love to get back with you with more detail. So please reach out to me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Don't have any hands, but I have a lot of stuff that came in on email and the chat. So if at the risk of everyone tiring of my voice, I'll read another question that came in. And this one is for Mayor Snook and Ms. Oschrin. And it's from Pete Marshall. And it's at the intersection of zoning and transportation. So he says, I believe the proposed new zoning ordinance will require the city to make vast investments in infrastructure. For example, many buses currently run practically empty a lot of the time, even when they are free, because they are not convenient and it takes way too long to get from point A to point B. Where will the money come from to invest in the required infrastructure? If the plan is to raise taxes even more, how does that make housing more affordable? And why don't we start with Mayor Snook, if that's okay?
Sure. So the basic problem with Charlottesville's transit system is that it is unreliable. It is unreliable in terms of when it comes, and it's unreliable in terms of it doesn't come often enough for you to be able to rely on it. If you miss the 1 o'clock bus, for example, by being 2 minutes late, and you've got to wait another 58 minutes for the next bus, you're not going to use buses very often. The way to get that down, to get the reliability factor up, is to get the time between buses down. There is a proposal that the Regional Transit Partnership is working on studying right now for an option that would involve basically doubling the bus routes so that we would have no more than 30-minute service on any line and on some lines down to 15-minute service. That would be sort of the absolute minimum of what we would have to get to before people would begin to start to rely on the bus system. The way we do that, frankly, is by getting, I think I referred to earlier, 97% of the cost of a new bus is actually borne by state and federal funding. that's still a significant chunk of money for us. And of course, we have the operating expenses that go along with it. But once we get to the point where we've got enough bus service so that people can begin to rely on it, they can begin to build their lives around, hey, I can take a bus. I don't need a car. That's what we've got to get to. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem. We've got to get it started though. And the only way to get it started is to start with more buses.
Thanks. And Mr. Oschrin, do you want to chime in?
Sure. So I know that the, road and infrastructure funding comes from not just city and revenue there, but from partnerships with VDOT. One of the important things that, and other organizations and the federal government in general, one of the important things that Charlottesville has is our AAA bond rating. So we do have we're able to borrow money at the cheapest rate possible for a city, which is great. And we have to make sure that we're good stewards of everyone's money so that we can maintain that bond rating and continue to borrow as needed at the lowest rates. But one of the things that I want to say about bus reliability is I have taken the bus recently, and I took the whole 7, all of it, and it was packed. It was during rush hour after work, and it was packed from a bunch of people leaving the city to go to their houses and apartments in the county. And that is something we need to remember and consider when we're talking about transportation and transportation infrastructure, is who are the people who are using our roads and where are they coming to and from. So again, bringing it back to the point of building housing in town means that we will have both the more of the number of people needed to have a healthy bus system that has better reach and better frequency. And then it also will take cars off the road so that the buses can run more easily because they're not stuck in their own traffic. So paying attention to the county commuters and making less of them necessary because they're become city riders. That's a way where we can switch the priority of our transportation and infrastructure budget.
Thanks a lot. I have another question that came in this one via email, and it's for Mr. Fenwick. During your previous stint on council, you were on the losing side of a lot of 4-to-1 votes. Listening to recent candidate forums, it sounds like there are a lot of issues that split this candidate pool 4-to-1 with you as the one. How can you do good on council as a minority of one?
Well, first of all, it was not a lot. And when it did happen, it was on things like West Main Street, which was $20 million. And it was eventually stopped because it wasn't getting us what we needed to do. Perhaps it was on the Belmont Bridge, where I fought for 8 years to have that bridge repaired for $4 million. And they changed the design. I am afraid to ask what it's going to cost when they're finished with that. So I may be misinformed, but I was under the impression that a representative is supposed to represent. And if it's a hard issue, you are honest with your constituents, which really is the entire city, and you vote your conscience. I've never changed a vote at the last minute, so I'm not going to make any apologies for what I do or why I did it. That's 6 years ago. I'm looking forward, and I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks. We've got another question that has come in on the Q&A from anonymous attendee. It says, for Natalie, you've talked about the upsides of zoning, and you're assuming that it will help reduce home prices, which incidentally, the consultant's zoning diagnostic said would not happen. But what risks might be associated with upzoning, and how would you work to mitigate those risks? One other question, you've said that people should live close to where they work. Why don't you work closer? Why don't you live closer to the winery where you work?
I'm going to start with the end and work back to the beginning. My previous job was at a local hotel downtown, and I walked to work 80 to 90% of the time. It was wonderful and one of the best parts of my day. I recognized people along my route. I had regulars I would wave to. I watched buildings go up, and things happen around town. You're engaged with the community when you're at a walking level. It was a incredibly hard thing to give up when I got a new job last fall. The benefit of my new job is that everything else is better. So even if I lived near the winery where I work, it's not in a walkable area. It's in a rural community. There's no sidewalks or bike lanes on 29 South. So I would love to be able to bike to work. It truly was such a benefit. Studies show that there is a certain financial compensation people will give up in order to walk to work or have a better commute. That's real data and real money, because it is so much more pleasant to be one of those folks. If you haven't gotten a chance to have a regular walking or biking community or opportunity in your life, I wish you really could have that, because it's wonderful. When I lived and worked in Charleston, I did the same thing. I was able to walk and bike most everywhere that I wanted to go. So the first half of the question, Ben, would you mind briefly restating?
Yeah, sure. It's what are the risks associated with upzoning, and how would you work to mitigate those risks?
Great, 3 seconds.
Well, you know what, we have time.
Like
Take another minute, because we don't have a ton of more questions. So go ahead. I think people are interested in that.
Certainly. I know a lot of people are worried about the short-term effect of property taxes. As I mentioned before, there are programs by the city for tax relief that you can apply for. There's no wealth cap on that. It's for people with fixed incomes, for disabilities. There's a couple of different opportunities for that. In the mid to long term, property values will not be increased as much. I don't want to say go down. Our whole, housing is a investment economy, is built on the fact that property values go up, but affordability will increase, rents will go down. 60% of Charlottesvillians are renters. So making sure that they're not cost burdened by their rent is very important, and that there's rent protections so that people aren't evicted, and their support for repairs is really important. So I'm struggling to see risks as something that are an overwhelming concern, except for where it comes to displacement of folks who are already here in sensitive areas, but that's already going on. So the rezoning will mitigate that and cause that to happen at a less of a extent, as long as we do it smartly and make sure that there's enough supply in other parts of the city to take pressure off of those sensitive areas.
So thanks. So I think we have time for one more question before we do the closing remarks. And I'm going to mush two questions together from Mike Bevere and an anonymous attendee. So two questions that relate to the zoning. So first, there's uncertainty over the impact of increased density on traffic, but after 2 years, the council has not performed a standard traffic impact assessment that VDOT requires comprehensive plans to submit. Why wasn't this done? And then another zoning question is the revised framework that you briefly outlined there, Snook, and I think they're talking about the house-sized limitation, is attractive. How will you push it ahead? So sorry, there's two questions on zoning. They're not totally related, but if you could take that.
Let me first try to answer the first question first, and that is that as I interpret the rules, it is not up to council to submit or to perform the standard traffic impact analysis. I will confess that I did not know that there was a requirement that that the city perform a traffic impact analysis upon the completion of a comprehensive plan, because that frankly is an administrative matter that we don't see. So I've just, since I saw the question posed in the chat a few minutes ago, I looked up the regulations, and it looks like there is supposed to have been something done, not by council, but by staff, and I'll have to try to find out what the story is there. And the second piece question, I'm trying to remember what the.
So
what
was
the-
that you mentioned favoring the idea that that everything is house sized in residential areas,
Yeah.
and and you
Okay.
kind of do what you want within that, and that was attractive. How will you push that ahead?
Well, the first thing is, again, recognizing that we're still in the realm of, well, actually, we will see Module 3 come out, I think, tomorrow. I think that's the current plan. And only at that point will we have seen all of the zoning plan come out. I have offered the suggestion a number of times that we go back and try to have to have the zoning code do something that embraces this notion of maximum building size within a residential zone. I haven't figured out exactly how I want that to work. My one thought was that if we said no building in a residential, and say an RA zone, should be more than 4,500 square feet, that would embrace virtually every. I mean, there are a few houses that are not 4,500 square feet, but not very many. And so that would certainly be something that we could say, hey, within the house, the notion of whatever house size looks like for that kind of zone, that's something that we could use to accomplish that. The second thing that I'm puzzled by, because nobody's really explained to me how this is supposed to either help or, for that matter, hurt, is this 2,500 square foot lot size. And if you've been following the debate with some intensity, you may have seen that. You may have wondered, how does that actually work? And I honestly don't know, because I have tried to figure it out, and I have tried to get into arguments with people, and they've agreed with me that some of my concerns are valid. And when I've asked them, well, what is it actually going to help with? I haven't really gotten a very solid answer for. And that's one of those things that may cause people to be sort of apprehensive or scared that, hey, things are really going to get out of hand. Again, I think that we have a couple of things like that, the other being the double density bonus, that I don't think they're going to work. I don't think we ought to put them in there. If we put them in there thinking, well, we don't really know what they're going to do, but maybe they won't do any harm, then we really start to get into what I consider the first law of zoning, which is unintended consequences. We don't know what those unintended consequences are likely to be, but we can reasonably anticipate there will be some. So I don't have a precise answer for that question of how we're going to make it happen, but I've got some general thoughts.
Thanks. I'll interject that if you find for me a plot that's 2,500 square feet and has 40 feet of frontage, let me know so I can graze my unicorn on it. So I think now we'll turn it over to Len, who can get the closing statements going. And thanks everybody for your question.
Okay. Thank you all for responding to all of our questions and your patience with us this evening. I know it's late. So we did offer to let you close with about 3 minutes of remarks each. I hope that you'll take that time to respond to your fellow candidates and things that you heard from each other that you either liked or disagreed with, but also give us your pitch that you want voters in these neighborhoods to take away from this evening. So I don't think that we actually gave you an order for the closing remarks. So I'm just going to go with the question one order. And so we're going to start again with Dashad Cooper.
And by the way, it's 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
I'm sorry, my little dog kept bothering me. I want to thank everybody for coming and asking all of the tough questions. I want to thank the candidates too as well. So I just want to first start saying this is going to be a tough and close race. Win or lose, I'm willing to support any of these candidates, and I'm gonna definitely make sure they are staying in line. One of my things that I'm gonna be champion on is being transparent and authentic, and continue to make sure that all the citizens in Charlottesville have a voice. Doesn't matter, where you live or what upbringing that you have. Everybody has a voice in Charlottesville. I'm sorry, that just threw me off for a second.
Take your time. Sorry about that. I
but-
muted him.
No, it's okay. I thought it was one of y'all that said something, so it threw me off. But just continue to get to know the people, learn the people, continue to listen to them, and be straightforward with them. I think this council and the next year council has a unique opportunity, like I said, to continue to keep the citizens of Charlottesville at the table, and then definitely continue to lean on and support our local organizations that are in Charlottesville, and we continue to strive and fund towards education. I know that right now we got Buford going on, but also we have Walker too as well, that need a little bit of work. But the kids are our future, and the future of our council, future of our country, and even state. So close this argument just by saying that vote for Dashad. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. Thank you, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you, Dashad. And next we're going to go with Natalie Oschrin.
Perfectly executed. So yeah, thank you all so much for your attention tonight. Thank you, Len and Ben, for putting this together. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the important things that City Council can do to address the concerns of our neighbors. I encourage all of you to check out my website, nat4cville.com, that's the number 4, for more info about my platform, or to sign up to volunteer or request a yard sign. Happy to drop those off. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at nat4cville, so you can find updates there. We can make progress on housing, transit choices, and safety. We don't need to show up with a no, can't, won't attitude. We can work together to make progress. These things are all intertwined and have to be addressed simultaneously in order for a difference to be made and that difference to be felt. Some sidewalks aren't a luxury. They should be thought of like a utility, like water or power. Something we must also keep in mind as we become more intentional about making a city safer for bikers and walkers is equal protection and enforcement of those safety laws. In general, pedestrian and bicycle victims of car violence are disproportionately Black and brown, and laws policing movement like jaywalking and speeding have been applied subjectively to target minorities more frequently. So when we build safe bike lanes and sidewalks and install traffic calming measures, we must make sure that neighborhoods across town see the benefit, not just whiter or wealthier areas. And bike lanes need to be discussed as ways to increase freedom of movement, not just as a tool for gentrification. Lastly, since 1971, there's always been one woman on City Council representing the citizens of Charlottesville. I would like to keep that streak alive. I intend to. Women's participation in politics it helps advance gender equality and affects both the range of policy issues that get considered and the types of solutions that are proposed. Charlottesville women must have a voice at the table, and with your support, we can keep that seat. I'm looking forward to representing Charlottesville in a progressive and equitable way. Election day, as you all know, is for the primary is June 20th, with early voting lasting through the 17th of June. I ask for your support and your help to make sure all of our citizens can move forward. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Next, we have Lloyd Snook.
So I want to start off by answering a question that somebody had posed just a few minutes ago that we didn't really get to. Question is, where are we going to find the money to build and fix and build sidewalks? I would say that the big issue for Charlottesville recently has not so much been money. We have allocated money for sidewalks. We haven't had the project managers on the staff to make them sure that they get built to be able to actually implement the plans. One of the things that happened in this budget for this current fiscal year is that we finally were able to persuade the city manager and budget staff that we needed to add 2 more positions for project managers. I think one of them may have been filled by now. It's tough to fill right now, but that's actually how we're going to try to narrow this gap on sidewalks. Let me say, when I ran 4 years ago, I ran with really two themes. One was to make Charlottesville work again, to make the government work again. And then the second piece to it was to let's work together, to have council work with the city manager's staff, to work together, to not have arguments and fights all the time, to talk with one another, to listen to one another, to do our work behind the scenes so that when we get up on the dais, we're not arguing about things that we're hearing for the first time. And I think we've been able over the last couple of years to bring some degree of order and balance and sense to our system of governance. We've been able to adopt some really very comprehensive bits of legislation, a comprehensive affordable housing plan that was like 4 years in the making. We finally got it approved at the end of 2001. We got a climate action plan that was approved last year, only about 3 years late. We got a PCOB ordinance approved a couple of years ago that was a major rewrite of a really flawed ordinance that had come out 2 years before that. We got the comprehensive plan finally enacted, only about 5 years late. We got a very difficult and thorough collective bargaining ordinance passed, and that's something that one of the things, it sort of typifies the way that I operate and the way I operate as a legislator. What I did was, as sort of the lawyer in the House, to go around and ask everybody on council, what are your issues? Let's find out what the issues are. We found out that there are only about 3 or 4 or 5 issues that were important. I went to talked to the union folks. I talked to the management folks. We came up with an agreement. And by the time we got to actually having the meeting, we were able to understand what the issues were. We narrowed them. We got the thing passed without a lot of fuss. So that's the kind of thing that I would like to do and continue to do, and to do for another 4 years. And if you are interested in, what more I have to say on things, or you want to get a yard sign or help me out, www.lloydsnookforcouncil.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. Next, we're going to go to Michael Payne.
Sure. Thank you all for putting this together. I know we got into some really deep, important policy issues that we can't, fully get into just in, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. If anyone wants to reach out to discuss things further, you can always email me at mpayne@charlottesville.gov or reach out through my website, michaelpayneforseville.org. I'm always happy to email or meet with folks one-on-one to discuss things further. I'll say, it's been a difficult few years for Charlottesville, and I want to do something that has not always been the easiest thing to do, but that is focus on the positive things that have happened in local government. I think we've finally started to put together a solid team within the city manager's office, filling vacancies. There's still a lot more to do there, but I think we're on a very good trajectory. As Lloyd mentioned, we've passed an affordable housing plan and invested at least $10 million a year in affordable housing. We're starting to see real units built in Friendship Court. People in June are going to be moving back into Crescent Halls. There are investments at South First Street, investments hopefully to come in West Haven that are making a real fundamental difference in families' lives. People who are nurses, teachers, work in the service sector and run our community. That's happening. We've passed a climate action plan that made us the first city in Virginia to set an emissions reduction target goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. That's included several million of new funding this past budget cycle, along with new staff positions. As Lloyd also mentioned, we passed a Police Civilian Oversight Board ordinance that is one of the strongest in the state. We've passed a collective bargain ordinance that has set a new regional standard for workers' rights and helped lead our teachers to be able to organize within our schools. We've invested millions of dollars in school reconfiguration at Buford, as well as keeping in mind we have a lot more investments to make in increasing teacher salaries and benefits. Our regional transit partnership is making real progress, I think, to being able to create a regional transit authority. And I don't say that all to spike the football and says everything's perfect. I mean, there's a lot more work to do and we don't get everything right. But I think there are real positive things that have been happening. And I think we can build on that work, and we can't fundamentally solve every issue. A lot of things don't happen quickly overnight, but progress is being made. And I think if we keep at it, we can get there on a lot of issues. And so I hope to be able to use that experience and just build on the positive things that are underway if reelected. So thank you all.
Thank you. And our final speaker of the evening is Bob Fenwick.
All right, well, thanks to everybody who dialed in or clicked in, as it were. Our system of government was founded to guarantee that the power of governance always remains with the citizens. Our best days as a country and a city are when we work as a group. Our worst days happen when one individual or special interests hijack the system and try to govern by imposing policies that purposefully aim to exclude citizens. This urge to include everybody in the decisions are deeply embedded in our founding documents. We the people, our coinage, e pluribus unum, the consent of the governed. We have heard all of this all our lives. At present, we are confronting an effort by developers to monopolize all of the power of how this city renews itself and grows for the benefit of us all. This effort is the zoning rewrite, and the rewrite has crystallized around special interests whose primary aim is to profit and ordinary people whose focus is quality of life. They are on the clock and we are volunteers. I'll give you a few examples. I met a young woman yesterday who has been trying for over a year to arrange a meeting with Neighborhood Development Services or the Development Office to raise concerns about development issues. No one will return her calls. 1 year, no one will return her calls. She is probably the leader of this particular effort, and yet she was unaware of an important meeting because the city had made no effort to hear her side of the story. She found out about the meeting by chance. The developers and the city's development staff don't want to hear from us when we say development is simply not just about a big building. It is also about level of service, that the building prompts more police, more infrastructure, maintenance, more city staff, and of course, higher taxes. The rezoning rewrite promises us affordable housing. The fact is the plan will provide at best 6 units of affordable housing. The rewrite promises that increased traffic and parking will not impact the neighborhoods. We know better. The people who move here from across the country will not arrive on bikes or scooters. So much for our plans for alternative transportation. Putting aside the fact that no one knows exactly what the term affordable housing means, the plan explicitly promises that it will be fair and equitable. That remains to be seen. So we don't have time for our youth. We don't have money for properly funding mental and behavioral health. We don't even have space for our tree cover with a loss of 25% in the last 8 years. Yet we have time and money to waste tremendous effort on a rewrite that will shred our neighborhoods and those who need help the most. We're losing our focus. Some say we are heading in the wrong direction. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we can't do everything, but we can do better. We're like travelers passing through, and I promise to do what I can to leave Charlottesville a better place for all our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all of our candidates for joining us this evening and taking the time out to talk to people of Rugby Hills. I want to thank the couple dozen people who came out and asked questions and stayed for the whole duration. And I want to let all of you know that if you heard this and found it interesting and you would like to share the opportunity to see the issues discussed, we will be circulating a recording, and so you will be able to share that with others. And please make note of the election day, June 20th, and the fact that you can vote early anytime between now and June 17th, including on all the Saturdays until June 17th.
June 10th and June 17th are both Saturdays.
Okay, 2 Saturdays, June 10th and June 17th, and Mondays through Fridays otherwise. So we hope all of you will get out to vote and put to work the knowledge that you gained today by hearing from our candidates. Thank you very much.